From walking out of federal prison a free man after 11 years,
he's getting an immediate release.
Hey,
Yes.
congratulations!
Any day. Like literally, any day.
About to fall out this chair.
getting arrested for dealing drugs just 14 months later. This is how Keith Collier proved that some people never learn, no matter how many chances they get. Keith grew up in Davenport, Iowa, a small city along the Mississippi River. By age 17, he already had a burglary conviction on his juvenile record. That early brush with the law should have been a wake-up call. Instead, it was just the beginning of a pattern that would define his entire adult life. Federal court documents from his 2014 case described Keith as having a prolific criminal history. That's legal speak for someone who couldn't stay out of trouble no matter how many chances he got. Before his big federal case, he'd racked up multiple felony convictions that classified him as a habitual offender. The system had seen him before, and it would see him again. In 2014, at age 25, Keith was arrested and federally indicted for possession with intent to distribute more than 27 grams of crack cocaine and marijuana. He wasn't some small-time user who got caught with a personal stash. He was part of a larger drug trafficking operation in the Quad Cities area, moving serious weight and making serious money from other people's addictions. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 14 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. That's a lengthy sentence, the kind that should make someone seriously reconsider their life choices. Keith would spend his entire 20s and early 30s behind bars at facilities including the Federal Correctional Institution in Pekin, Illinois.
They're making a little bit of process, but at the end of the day, we're gonna get done.
You guys don't know, but Maurice, he was going through a lot.
During those years locked up, Keith reportedly spent time reflecting on his choices. He participated in prison programs, connected with pen pals, and talked about personal growth. And to be fair, prison gives you plenty of time to think about what went wrong. The question is whether you actually learn from it or just get better at telling people what they want to hear. Based on what happened next, Keith fell firmly in the second category. The turning point in Keith's story came in 2018, when he connected with Letitia Collier through a prison pen pal program. Letitia, who ran a tax preparation business called Boss Tax and Accounting in Davenport, found Keith's profile on a prison dating site and started writing to him.
This type of attire is not allowed in the federal prisons. They do not like see-through clothing. They actually want us to dress like nuns. But I do bend the rules occasionally so that my man can see a little bit of nipples and cleavage. I make sure I got my tight jeans.
Their connection developed quickly. Letitia visited him regularly, sent money for his commissary account, and became his biggest advocate on the outside. She even filed paperwork trying to secure his early release, particularly during COVID-19, when prison conditions became more dangerous.
I discovered 15 G's missing, you know?
Oh, I haven't sent you any statements or anything. So how do you,
Look, you ain't the only one that knows that I got an encounter, man.
The relationship was featured prominently in Love During Lockup when it premiered in July 2023. The show documented Letitia's efforts to bring Keith home, their phone conversations from prison, and her preparations for his release. Viewers watched as she counted down the days, decorated their home, and planned their future together. They married in a low-key ceremony shortly after his release in September 2024. After more than 6 years of loving someone through letters and prison visits, they could finally start their life together. It was supposed to be the happy ending viewers were rooting for, but even during the show, there were warning signs that anyone with sense should have noticed. One major red flag came early, when fans discovered how Letitia had handled Keith's money. While he was locked up, Keith had managed to save $15,000 from his prison job and money sent by family. When he got out, he learned that Letitia had spent that entire amount on his wedding ring. Not on a house down payment, not on starting a business, not on anything practical. A ring. Meanwhile, she'd only allocated $1,000 to hire a paralegal to handle his early release paperwork. The math didn't math, as they say. She spent 15 times more on jewelry than on legal help that could have gotten him home sooner. The priorities were completely backwards, and fans called it out immediately on social media. But Letitia wasn't just bad with money. She had her own extensive criminal record that made Keith's look tame by comparison. Her rap sheet included felony check fraud, driving on a suspended license, identity theft, and scamming clients through her business. She'd been convicted multiple times as a habitual offender. In fact, while Keith was still locked up and their relationship was being filmed, Letitia was actively defrauding her tax clients. In April 2024, she was charged with felony theft for allegedly accepting client payments for tax services but failing to remit the funds to the IRS. She pocketed over $8,000 that should have gone to the government. Her clients trusted her with their money and their taxes, and she allegedly stole from them. Then, in August 2025, Letitia was arrested for an even more brazen scheme. She allegedly used a former client's personal information to fraudulently rent a house in LeClaire, Iowa, without paying rent. This was someone who'd been her client for approximately 10 years. She had access to sensitive business and personal details through that professional relationship, and prosecutors say she exploited all of it to forge documents for a rental application. She allegedly rented a house using someone else's identity, lived there rent-free, and left her victim to deal with the consequences. The charges included felony forgery, felony identity theft valued over $10,000, and misdemeanors for driving without insurance and operating a vehicle with no registration. So Keith didn't just marry a supportive partner. He married a woman who was arguably more criminally active than he was, someone facing potential prison time that could exceed his own sentence. They weren't building a stable life together. They were two habitual offenders, enabling each other's worst instincts. The patterns of dysfunction ran deep in their relationship, and the show captured plenty of it. Keith Michael Collier was released from federal prison on September 20th, 2024, after serving approximately 10 years of his 14-year sentence. Good behavior credits and compassionate release efforts secured through Letitia's advocacy had gotten him out early. He walked out of FCI Pekin a free man, ready to start fresh. Or so the story went. He was placed on supervised probation through the U.S. Probation Office for the Central District of Illinois. The terms were strict and clear. No drug use, no association with felons, and mandatory regular check-ins with his probation officer. These weren't suggestions. They were legal requirements that could send him straight back to prison if violated. Early episodes of Life After Lockup depicted Keith's excitement at experiencing simple freedoms again, eating takeout whenever he wanted, planning a family with Letitia, talking about legitimate work, possibly in construction, or pursuing music under his rap alias Lil Man. He expressed all the right sentiments about going straight and being grateful for his second chance. But reality set in quickly. Keith and Letitia moved into a rented townhouse in Davenport, the same city where he'd built his criminal reputation before prison. They stayed in the Quad Cities area, surrounded by the same streets, the same people, and the same temptations that had landed him in federal prison in the first place. One unaired subplot from the show revealed just how precarious his situation was. Keith arrived 15 minutes late to a probation check-in because of a GPS error. Just 15 minutes. He narrowly avoided having his probation revoked over it. That's how little margin for error he had. One mistake, one wrong turn, one moment of bad judgment could cost him everything. By spring 2025, the cracks were showing wider. Letitia's tax business collapsed under the weight of fraud allegations and unpaid debts. She faced multiple evictions in 2025 for unpaid rent exceeding $30,000. The business that was supposed to support them both was drowning, taking their household finances down with it. Financial stress is one of the biggest triggers for ex-inmates to fall back into crime. Legitimate work doesn't pay what drug dealing pays, especially for convicted felons with limited job prospects. Keith had the added pressure of supporting a wife who was hemorrhaging money and facing her own legal battles. In May 2025, Keith appeared in promotional content for the show, including a Meet the Colliers video that emphasized redemption and new beginnings. He talked about telling his side of the story, about showing the man behind the criminal record. The message was clear. He'd changed, he'd grown, he was different now. But less than 6 months later, he'd be back in handcuffs. Throughout this period, both Keith and Letitia maintained active social media profiles. They posted about their ride-or-die relationship, shared couples photos, and projected an image of unity and success. Letitia even launched a new business called The Courtroom Hustle, positioning herself as a paralegal who could help other convicted felons navigate the legal system. The audacity was stunning. A woman facing multiple felony fraud charges with an active court case pending was offering legal services to vulnerable people seeking second chances. She branded herself as the stiletto-wearing felon and marketed her criminal record as a qualification. Keith supported this venture publicly, appearing in promotional materials and backing Letitia's pivot to legal services. Neither of them seemed to grasp how tone-deaf and potentially dangerous this was. Or maybe they just didn't care. Looking back, their social media presence during 2025 reads like a manual on denial and delusion. They posted inspirational quotes about overcoming obstacles while actively violating the law. They celebrated small victories while ignoring the disaster brewing around them. They presented themselves as a power couple when they were actually two habitual offenders spiraling toward another arrest. The whole facade was built on sand, and anyone could see the tide coming in. On November 6, 2025, just 14 months and 16 days after Keith's release from federal prison, everything collapsed. The arrest started with a car accident. A driver crashed their vehicle and admitted to police that they'd been smoking synthetic marijuana, commonly called K2 or spice. When officers asked where they got it, the driver said they'd bought $70 worth from someone named Keith. They identified Keith Collier from a photo and provided text messages linked to his probation file. That's right, Keith was using his probation-monitored phone number to conduct drug deals. The same phone number his probation officer had on file. The same number he knew authorities could trace. It was a level of stupidity that defied belief. Bettendorf police, working with the Scott County Drug Task Force, set up a controlled buy. They sent a confidential informant, wired for audio and video, to text Keith's number and arrange a marijuana purchase. Keith took the bait. Detectives followed the meetup to a McDonald's parking lot. After the transaction, they moved in and arrested Keith. A search of his person turned up 57.94 grams of raw marijuana, packaged in 2 pre-weighed 1-ounce baggies. There was no smoking paraphernalia, no personal use items, just dealer-sized quantities in pre-packaged amounts, ready for sale. Keith was read his Miranda rights and admitted to smoking marijuana frequently since his release from prison. He confessed to regular drug use while on federal probation that explicitly prohibited any controlled substances. He'd been violating the terms of his release every single day. Officers then executed a search warrant on the townhouse Keith shared with Letitia. They found drugs in plain view throughout the home. In the bedroom, on the nightstand next to Letitia's side of the bed, they found 18.88 grams of marijuana in a bag. In a cookies box, also on the nightstand, they found 5.22 grams of loose marijuana and roaches from smoked joints. Letitia, who was home during the search, admitted the marijuana on her side of the bed was hers. She was arrested on the spot for misdemeanor possession of a controlled substance. While Iowa has decriminalized some marijuana offenses, recreational use remains illegal, and Letitia's admission gave police everything they needed. During her arrest, Letitia made a video call to a friend named Mary, who was live streaming on YouTube at the time. Viewers watched in real time as Letitia, wearing an NYPD sweatshirt, dealt with being arrested. The video went viral across Love After Lockup fan groups, with people commenting on the irony of wearing police department merch while getting busted for drugs. The charges against Keith were severe: 2 felony counts of possession of a controlled substance, 1 felony count of possession with intent to deliver, and 1 count of failure to affix a drug tax stamp, a Class D felony that alone carries up to 5 years in prison and a $7,500 fine. Iowa law requires anyone possessing illegal drugs to purchase and affix tax stamps to prove they paid tax on the controlled substances. Obviously, no one actually does this because it's basically admitting to a crime, but it gives prosecutors an additional charge to stack on top of drug offenses, increasing potential prison time. Keith's total bond was set at $25,000, with portions requiring cash only. As of November 8, 2025, he remains in Scott County Jail, unable to post bail. His probation violation hearing is pending, and the outcome is essentially guaranteed. Letitia, meanwhile, was released less than an hour after booking on a $1,000 bond. She immediately posted on Facebook, touting her lawyering skills and projecting defiance. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. She walked free while her husband faced the possibility of decades behind bars. For Keith, the arrest triggered far more than just state charges. Federal probation violations carry serious consequences. The arrest didn't just mean new state charges for Keith, it meant he'd violated every major condition of his supervised release from federal prison. The probation agreement he signed prohibited drug use, prohibited association with felons, prohibited criminal activity of any kind. He'd broken all of those terms repeatedly. When someone on federal supervised release violates their probation, they face a revocation hearing. That means he still had roughly 4 years hanging over his head if his probation was revoked. But it gets worse. The new state felony charges would stack on top of any federal time. If convicted in Iowa State Court, Keith could face additional years for the possession with intent to distribute and the tax stamp violation. Keith Collier's story was never a redemption arc. It was always a countdown to disaster, packaged as entertainment for viewers who wanted to believe that love and second chances could overcome patterns ingrained over decades. From age 17 to age 36, Keith's life has been defined by criminal activity, incarceration, and reoffending. A burglary conviction as a teenager, multiple felonies in his 20s, a 14-year federal sentence for drug trafficking, release after 10 years, immediate return to drug dealing, arrest 14 months later, facing another decade in prison. The pattern is clear, consistent, and seemingly unbreakable. Keith is now facing the consequences of decisions he made knowing exactly what the penalties would be. He can't claim ignorance. He can't claim he didn't understand the terms of his probation. He can't claim the system failed him when he had every resource and opportunity to succeed. What makes his downfall truly deserved is that it was completely avoidable. He chose to stay in Davenport instead of relocating to a fresh start. He chose to associate with other felons despite probation restrictions. He chose to deal drugs despite knowing he was under federal supervision. He chose to use his monitored phone for illegal transactions. He chose to keep drugs in his home where they could be found. Every single one of those was a choice, not a mistake, not a circumstance beyond his control, a deliberate decision to prioritize criminal activity over freedom. And now he's paying the price for those choices, as he absolutely should be. The show that made him famous was called Love During Lockup and Life After Lockup. For Keith and Letitia, it's coming full circle. They might soon be living Love During Lockup again, only this time with Keith calling from prison and Letitia on the outside, possibly facing her own prison sentence for her fraud cases. Subscribe for more updates on your favorite cast members.